and that healing is going to be continuous. It's not just this one trick pony. It's not just this one step you're done. It's not just you write it out and you write your poem, you perform it on stage and you're done. It is a process. It is a journey that you have to continue to go on and be willing to grow with it and to be willing to accept the things that happen and accept the things about yourself and the things that you don't like yourself. You have the power to change those, but make sure that you get you some help. Happy hello. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I want to welcome you to another episode of You Heard It Here with me, the TC Heard. Whatever time you are listening to this or watching, I just want to say thank you for tuning in. Today's episode, since it's going to be our first episode in October. My bad, y'all. I'm kind of rushing the holidays. Since it is our first episode in October, we're talking about Domestic Violence Awareness Month because that's what month it is. And I want to talk about my story. If you have purchased my book, Fine Like Wine, Getting Better with Time, which you should, and it's available at my website, thetcheard.com, you would find in that book poetry about my experience. But today, because I'm talking about my story without the mask of a poetic form, without the mask of my play that was also written and directed by me, and it was my honors project in 2014 at Bridgewater College, where I got to see my friends on campus play out certain moments of my life and relive the trauma all over again. It's not going to be in the novel form, which is going to come next year, The Bright Smile, the novel, which you're going to see pretty much a long, detailed history and illustrated form of what I went through in certain scenes. I want to talk about my experience with this today because in the past few weeks, I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned a lot about myself, about how my trauma has played a role in how I communicate in my relationships, whether they be platonic or whether they be romantic. And the reason I want to talk about that today is because the goal of my intention is, of course, to talk about the transformations that I'm having along my journey and then of other people. But because it was really brought to my attention this weekend with my partner, and I had to do some self-reflection about why I was showing up or communicating the way that I was and where that was coming from. So I was writing in my therapy journal. So I keep a therapy journal because there are some times where I can't always see my therapist like on the regular schedule. And of course, like I've expressed to you all, I've been experiencing one hell of a storm the past month and a half. And I do want to say God has shown up and showed out right on time. So thank you, Lord, for that. But my trauma was showing up a way that I wasn't clearly seeing it. And it had a lot to do with surviving the type of relationship that I had with my very first ex. For now, we're going to call him Dylan. Okay. So this episode may have some stories where it's going to trigger some people. If you feel like you're not in a space to listen to that, I totally understand you. Feel free to turn off the episode. But again, I'm just sharing my story and what I've done to help me get through my trauma and what I'm doing on my journey of healing. Okay. So according to the Department of Justice, I'm going to tell you guys what the definition of domestic violence is. So domestic violence is a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that is used by one partner to gain or maintain power and control over another intimate partner. Domestic violence can be physical, sexual, emotional, economic, psychological, or technological actions or threats of actions or other patterns of coercive behavior that influence another person within an intimate partner relationship. This includes any behaviors that intimidate, manipulate, humiliate, isolate, frighten, terrorize, coerce, threaten, blame, hurt, injure, or wound someone. Domestic violence can happen to anyone regardless of race, age, sexual orientation, religion, sex, or gender identity. It affects all people of social economic backgrounds and education levels, and it occurs in both opposite sex and same-sex relationships and can happen to intimate partners who are married, living together, dating, share a child, and etc. So, just another few facts for you all. About 1 in 3 women and about 1 in 4 men report having experienced severe physical violence from an intimate partner in their lifetime. About 1 in 5 women and 1 in 13 men have experienced contact sexual violence by an intimate partner, and 14% of women and 5% of men report having been stalked by an intimate partner, according to the CDC. Now, I'm not going to tell you guys everything. And of course, in the beginning of my episode, it was a shameless plug for plugging my accomplishments and my books because I'm an entrepreneur and I'm an author. That's what we do. And I use my story to hopefully help other people get through theirs. So I mentioned earlier that within the past few weeks, I was made aware of how my trauma showed up in how I was communicating. To give you a little bit of background, I met Dylan the summer before I went to high school. So, summer I was 13 going on 14. I was raised primarily by my grandmother and my aunt in Washington, D.C. My mom suffered severe PTSD from her labor and delivery with me because we both almost died, and I came out disabled with what happened within her C-section. My mom was around. I still would see her, go to her house and things of that nature. So I don't want that to be a thing because she definitely still was present in my life. But I primarily lived with my grandmother and my aunt. So did my niece. I can say that as I've been reflecting and thinking about what I actually want to share in this episode, I want to share things from my experience. I have to keep repeating that because there's a part of me that knows that certain people or certain family members that may hear this are not going to like what they hear, but it is from my experience and my point of view. And my point of view is going to be different from someone else's. While growing up, I always felt like there was something wrong with me and I didn't fit. Of course, there was a lot of physical therapy. There was a lot of things. I was really sickly as a child. I caught colds very easily and just a lot of things. I was always a fighter. My grandmother always told me I was just always a fighter and how God just built that warrior spirit in me. But not having my father present, I can say now at 31 years old, I think really played a key role in how I interacted with men and how I saw men, where I did not see a actual positive version of what love looked like. I saw what love was supposed to be in the movies and in the rom-coms and of course the Nicholas Spark movies and things of that nature. And I just thought that even the moments where your partner had toxic behavior towards you or how they communicated with you, that was just love and you just went through it and you got over it and you figured it out. Well, that played another role in how I interacted with Dylan. I was never the kid that fit in or the popular kid that got everyone to come over for sleepovers and everyone wanted to come to my house or wanted to hang out with my parents and things of that nature. I was never that kid. I was the chubby girl who got teased a lot. I was the girl who they always called an Oreo or the white girl. I didn't know how to be Black properly. I was knowing that I came from a mixed background. I tried to be enough for each race and still felt like I could never be enough. So I had a bit of an identity crisis and trying to find where do I fit in this world. And that summer before I went to high school and I met Dylan, I felt like he saw me when I was invisible, and I finally had someone to love me the way that I was and not try to change me, because I didn't fit in with my friend groups or at summer camp or at school. I didn't fit in with my family because I had a bit of a middle child syndrome that I still feel like I suffer from a little bit today, where my sister is 13 years older than me. My cousin's 7 years older than me. My niece is 7 years younger than me. And my other cousins and everybody else is pretty much 7 and below years younger than me. So I never really had anybody in my age range to talk to and to communicate. And when I tried to talk to like my sister or my cousin about things that were going on, or try to connect with my niece, it never clicked. And I got teased a lot. And they just never understood me and the fact that I like different things, but I also like things of my own culture. There was a time that I figured out the reason why I denied the Black part of me for so long is because when my grandmother lived on Q Street, all my very first dog that I had, before we moved up to Northeast, the very first dog that I had, her name was Foxy. She was here before I was here. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but I know that she got out of the yard and went to some other's neighbor's house and scratched their dog. But in return, which I feel like there's more to the story, but this is a childhood version and the story that I got. In return, all I remember is them cutting my dog open, slicing her, wrapping her in that plastic tarp that, like the runners that we used to have, that grandma used to have in the old house, and leaving her on the porch. And I saw that as a child. And I think that was the traumatic experience that made me not really want to own the Black side of me. And the fact that at that time, the Black people I was around, I was never Black enough for them, and all they did was just ostracize me and tease me so much to the point where I just felt so horrible about myself, and I didn't love myself, and I didn't have that thick skin to develop that, and I just wanted to feel validated so much that when I didn't get that from them, or get it from my family, or get it from the people that I was looking for this validation for, instead of looking for it within myself, it made me rebel a lot. But when I met Dylan, something just clicked. That missing piece that I was trying to figure out, just it it seemed to be enough. He seemed to be enough to fulfill me for that moment. And I wasn't thinking so much about the fact that I didn't have the validation of my father that I was so desperately wanting and needing, that I didn't have the emotional availability from my mom to give me more of her emotionally, but she provided financially. And it took until after college for us to connect deeper on an emotional level, because she was a single Black mom out here trying to do everything she can and feeling guilty that I didn't have the same experience with my father that she had with hers, and how that affected me. But with Dylan, we had similar interests. I wasn't the white Black girl. I wasn't the Oreo. I was just Talaya, and that was enough for me. But it wasn't until his father had gotten sick and passed away, where there was just this 180 switch from him, that I feel like he will never be the same since then. He's never been the same since then. When his father passed away, I was there, I was present for him, but we started to get into a lot of reckless behavior together. We started drinking more heavily because, yes, I had started drinking at 13. Because of the fact that my grandmother forced me pretty much to live with my mom, we were not seeing eye to eye. We were bumping heads. And let's be real, there was puberty. There was just the fact that my mom we are kind of the same person. And when we communicate, I don't know, it's because she's a Leo and I'm a Cancer. And it's just like we miss I don't know what it is, but especially at that time while puberty and everything else was happening and I wasn't fitting in and I was just heavy and trying to be a part of the cool kids at Science and Sex at Oxon Hill, but I really wasn't, and I didn't have the money that some of these other kids have, like, all the stuff that just was not important, that was so important at the time in high school, it played a role into why I was just so angry with her, and I couldn't figure out to tell her why I was so angry, and then, I wanna say the middle of my sophomore year was when Dylan's father had passed, and we had our first actual argument, and it was about the behaviors we were engaging in, drinking too much and partying too much, and I was just like, "I don't wanna do this." Like, I have, like, drill team meets to go to because I was in ROTC my whole 4 years at Oxon Hill, and I was telling him how I wasn't feeling like doing it, and I don't remember what his response was verbally, but the next thing that happened after I was expressing myself was his hand coming across my face. Now, if y'all see me, you can also see, even without the makeup, I have red, orange undertones. If you hit me or if I fall, I bruise very easily. I remember going to the bathroom. I don't think I cried. I was just shell shocked. I was just standing in the mirror. I like threw some water in my face and I just got myself together and went back out there because I remember seeing my sister be hit by her son's father when they were in an apartment in Brinkley Road. I remember seeing her get abused by him and her saying, and that's just what you did because you loved them. I didn't know exactly at the time everything that was going on. All I knew is that he hit her, she had a response, she stayed, my family would come, threaten him, people went to jail for threatening him. Both families got involved and how chaotic it was, and all I knew was if I had said something to my mother or my grandmother or my uncle, my aunts, all of them would have been over there and people would have been to jail, and I didn't want that because also here's the extra layer. My ex-boyfriend was white, and we all know who would have won come court time. Let's just be real. So, I continued to stay in that relationship, and I continued to every time he couldn't deal with the emotions that he was feeling, or he didn't like what I had to say back to him, or the fact that when he would talk down to me so bad to the point where I didn't even want to be on this earth anymore, I started engaging in other unhealthy, reckless activities to hopefully get someone to actually see what I was going through, to hopefully have someone read my mind and see that I was in such pain and I was dealing with such toxicity from this person that they would come and reach out their hand and grab me and help me get out of it, and no one did. But also too, at the time and even now, I can't expect someone to read my mind or read my thoughts because no one's a mind reader. Now, I'm not saying that some don't exist in this world, but for the people that I was around, as far as I know, no one's a mind reader can read my thoughts. We were getting into it so bad to the point where I remember some of my friends in high school, when I would be at drill practice, would be asking me what was wrong going on with my arms and why were all of these bruises showing up on my legs and even my back if like my shirt accidentally came up if we were doing drill practice and things of that nature. And I would just lie and say, "Oh, I was just trying to practice for the drill team." Oh, well, me and my um cat scratched me because I not only was cutting, I also had him cut me one time where I still have it, where it goes all the way down my arm, which is one of the very few times where he did try to actually end my life. Dylan's voice became the voice inside my head that always told me I couldn't do something. Dylan's voice became the voice in my head that always said I was never enough and I will never be enough and I wouldn't be anything and why try anyway, how disgusting and fat I looked and how much I couldn't love myself and how much I had to do just to transform myself into whatever it is that he wanted. And even still, if that's what he asked for, it was not enough. I was never enough after that point. And I always felt like I was doing something wrong, even though it was not my fault nor my responsibility to control his actions of putting his hands on me, that my body was not his tree for him to leave his marks for everyone to see, but I allowed him to do that because I didn't know any better. And I was so deep in what I thought love was that I just didn't expect anything else. And I was so down on myself. And even that time, not knowing what anxiety and depression was, that's what also too what I was experiencing from not being able to express myself freely, that I was suicidal. He pushed me to that point, to the point where I didn't want to have to keep dealing with the fights with my mom. I didn't want to have to keep dealing with trying to be accepted by my family and the people around me and trying to do everything that I can, because at the same time, I was so angry at my father for not being around that I was doing everything and trying to accomplish everything, that because I knew he was in the area, to get him to see me, that maybe one day he would show up and say, "That's my daughter and I'm proud of her." But that never happened. I kept waiting on the day where I would have my movie moment and it would just click, and the click never happened. The first person I told, for purposes, her name's gonna be Annabelle. When I told Annabelle, her reaction was, "Well, what did you do to him?" Even though I wrote it a little differently in the play. She was such good friends with him that the first time I told her, it became my fault. But then when she saw it for herself, because Dylan got very bold and not caring anymore about keeping our secret a secret and showing the group of friends at the time that this is what he was doing to me, that then she started changing her mind and becoming more supportive. It wasn't until, I want to say, right before graduation, when we got into such a bad fight, that he proposed. I accepted because I still wasn't in a place of loving myself. Yes, I had just did the cotillion and I was Miss Congeniality. I was pretty, it was cool. At the time, I was my smallest I had been in my life, but it was because I had also engaged in constantly throwing up everything I ate. And to this day, I still struggle with my eating disorder, bulimia nervosa, but I have not relapsed in 4 years. But food is something that still is a trigger for me because I love it and I hate it at the same time. But now I'm in more of a healthy state to not have the same relationship I had with it then that I have with it now. But at the time then, like I said, that first moment when he snapped, and his voice became mine in my head, how much he told me how ugly and stuff and how fat I was. I started engaging in that to lose weight the fastest way that I possibly could. And it didn't help the fact that I was always teased also too about my weight. I was, out of my group of friends in high school, I was the tallest and the fattest one out of all of my friends. And it made me self-conscious a lot, especially when we would take pictures and I still would be the biggest one out of all of them. So I was my smallest at that time before graduation. But I started getting a little bit more confidence because I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, even though I still saw myself as fat, I still was trying to gain that confidence and know how pretty I was. Because I was. I was fine and I'm still fine. But he didn't like that. When I started to come out of my shell a little bit more, start to understand at least the woman that I wanted to become and what it is that I want to do, even though my college plans didn't work out the way that I wanted to at that time before for high school graduation. He didn't like the fact that I was getting like that. So of course he had to knock me a few notches down off my pedestal. One of our biggest fights was him ruining my cotillion dress that my mom had spent $500 for, putting paint all over it, which was supposed to be my wedding dress, and then us getting into a fight so bad that that was another time where he took a knife out on me. It then continued to it being in such a public setting. One time when I went out of town with my mom that I was underage. We were in Lake City. We took a bus trip up there. He followed me up there, not knowing that he did that because I had to check in with him all the time. He had to know where I was at all times. I had to know who I was hanging with. And if he didn't like the people I was hanging with, then I had to leave or I had to come home. And when he showed up in Atlantic City where I was on the boardwalk, I was just like, what are you doing here? We got into a fight publicly. And they called the boardwalk police after he hit me on the boardwalk in like some shop that we were in. I remember running into Caesar's Palace Hotel, and like just hiding out in the bathroom and waiting until everything was done and going to see my mom, praying that there was nothing on my face and grabbing some and then there was a little bit right here, and going to go grab makeup and concealer just to hide it and get back on the bus and go home. I know when my mom hears the stories and she reads it, she gets upset, but it had nothing to do with it being her fault. Because her and I, especially at that time, with like I told y'all, puberty, everything, we were not seeing eye to eye. And even more so right before I was supposed to go to college, I was being quite the asshole. And I will be very 100% with it. I was not communicating with her. I was dead set on going to University of Delaware, but I didn't get in. I didn't have another plan. They were telling me to do HBCU. I didn't want to go to HBCU at the time, but now I actually wish I went to HBCU. But then they were saying just go to community college. And I didn't want to become a statistic or think the fact that I was just going to be here, get pregnant, and never do anything with my life. So when Marcus Anderson showed up to Oxon Hill High School and said, hey, Bridgewater is giving out scholarships, I applied, I got in, I went sight unseen, and here we are. I give that a little bit of background of what I went through because certain parts of that relationship and how I communicated made its way into the way how I communicated with some of my ex-partners. And even so, one way that was brought to my attention this past weekend by my current boyfriend, now that I had to do some self-reflection. Because I felt like I wasn't my own person, I then became a control freak. Everything had to be on my time, and I started overdoing it for people and continuing to put people first before myself because I wanted to show people that I was worthy of love, not knowing that love is free and love was within me already and love was with God. But at the time, I wasn't close with God. I had to rebuild that relationship with Him, get close with Him to know that and to start my healing journey. I was so attached to my trauma that I was taking out my frustration on Dylan and what I went through and how angry I was with him, but couldn't safely express it, that I took out that anger on my exes. I took out the fact that my father never showed up for me the way that I wanted him to, and or the way that I also needed him to, that I wanted so much attention from my exes to be pay attention to me that do you not see how much I'm doing for you? So you know that I am worthy of your love and you can love me and I can do this and I can be the person you wanted. And that was just not a great thing at all. And at the time, I thought I was communicating what I needed, but I wasn't. I wasn't healing, and I wasn't healing the little girl inside of me that needed that validation, that needed that coaching, that needed that affirmations, that needed just that quality time, which now it's so ironic that my top 2 love languages are quality time and words of affirmation. And this past weekend with my boyfriend, who's also too been my best friend for 12 years, he's seen me even when in college when I was dealing with the toxicity with Dylan and the back and forth, and I'm with him, I'm not with him, and even the blackout moments I was having when I was triggered, not and going off on him or some other people we knew in college when I just felt pushed in a corner or I wasn't dealing with my emotions at the time and not even accepting that I operate from my emotions and I was just letting myself explode every now and again. He's seen it all. And he loves me anyway. Thank God for that man. But there are moments where even when we were friends, I was just like, I don't deserve your friendship. But when we started to date, we were in a space both of healing and both of definitely comfortability within ourselves. And I'll say that I have never been in a space where I love myself more than I have now. And I have more self-awareness. But I had to learn through this relationship that I am not the best communicator at all. Even though we've been friends for 12 years, he's my best friend. But knowing someone on a friend level, growing into the state of the romantic level, you're getting to know them on a different level. And now we're dealing with the everyday. But I started to do the same habits that I didn't know I was doing until recently when we talked about it. So we are long distance because right now we are in separate places because that's where we just ended up after graduation and life happened. So it's a lot of phone calls, video calls, back and forth and things of that nature. But for me, I wanted to make sure that he felt that I loved him by the constant communication and phone calls and the video calls. And for me, it does bring me energy to have those things, and he also can hear and replay it all this time that he definitely was right with the fact that we're both busy, that with how I'm trying to build my business and he's working the way he's working at his job and life has been lifing at both of it on both of our ends and work has just been working on both of our ends and the time sometimes when you're on the phone because I can't really multitask. I can't be on the phone and be doing this at the same time. I can't do both. My brain doesn't work like that. Even though I thought it did, it is not. He the way that he resets and takes his moment to reprieve is with isolation and solitude or with his game. For me, it's getting the support and being around my family, sometimes talking it out now. But I also too find reset in solitude because I'm naturally an introvert and I like that too. But because we were long distance, I just thought I have to communicate this much, to make sure he knows I deserve and I not deserve, but I say I'll earn his love. And that had nothing to do with him. That was me thinking that, okay, for once in my life, I have a healthy relationship and I don't want to mess this up. And I'm going to do everything I can not to mess this up and be present the way he wants me to always be available. But that's not idealistic. And not once did he ever communicate that to me. That was just my assumption from my past experiences. And I was bringing that here, not knowing that's what I was doing. Another thing was me expecting what worked for me in a moment of how to get back to what I need to do worked for him. It doesn't. And that's okay. It's okay to be different. You don't have to date the same person. And I will say the first time we had an argument, I'm going to choose the argument that it was about getting cages for the dogs, my dogs. I don't even want to say it really wasn't much of an argument. It was a disagreement, but I didn't like the feeling of it. So I shut down. And my first thought was, oh my God, he's going to leave and he's not going to be here anymore. And we communicated and worked through that. And he said, I'm not going anywhere. And why do you keep always thinking like every time you may like annoy me or rub me the wrong way, because we both annoy each other sometimes. And that's normal in a relationship. Why do you always say, what did I do now? And I didn't realize that all I kept thinking about was, if I mess this up, he's going to leave, or he's going to be so annoyed with me that he doesn't want to be with me anymore. And that trauma was reliving itself, me not knowing it. But it took communication from both of us and him communicating with me and letting me know, so that way I can, one, do some more healing, but also two, how I need to show up for him as a partner. And it's not about someone controlling the other or not. This is, like I said, the first healthy relationship that I've been in, where the one time we have a disagreement, okay, it's not threatening me about leaving or putting their hands on me or abusing me physically, emotionally, or mentally, or just playing with it. It's more, no, we have to communicate. We have to talk about this so that way we know how to move forward. And it's okay to have these disagreements. But we have to be willing to work with one another and work on it. If we say we're going to work on it to make this work, because we do want it to work. I am so thankful that I have someone willing to communicate with me and to do that. And that I'm actually in a place where I can and I want to communicate my needs, because hasn't always been easy. If my family wasn't always welcomed or really in a place to hear my needs, and they've always seen me as a child, the child that I've always been, the scared little timid person, but now I'm into being a grown woman, running my own businesses, but yet they still see me that way. I can't control that. I can control how I respond, but I can't control other people. Another example is, I've had some really, really great friendships and some great girlfriends. But there were moments in those friendships where I wasn't the best friend that I should have been. And I wasn't communicating what it was I needed in that moment. But I also realized that I didn't know how to communicate what it was that I needed in that moment. But I wanted them to just know what it was, or know or expect why I was feeling this way. The way that Dylan knew why I was upset when I went to the bathroom, or why we would be upset while we were in a fight. But I was also too taking that out on them. That's not fair to them. And it wasn't fair to do that to them. I also too, when I saw toxic behaviors from people that they were with, I projected my ex relationships and my trauma onto them. And the way that I did it was also too not the best way to do that. But like I mentioned in my last episode, is I had to become self-aware to get a support circle willing to work with me and willing to help me heal. But I had to, for me personally, and this is, again, no shade to anyone else, for me personally, I had to start reflecting and thinking about the ways and how I showed up and what roles I played in certain things, in certain situationships or certain relationships or friendships, and what I could have done differently, and what I know and what did I learn from that, and how do I communicate now moving forward, and how do I make sure that when I'm talking to someone that I'm actually being clear with my emotions and clear with my intention, and also too with my communication, what I say to them. I can't expect them to just know when I'm mad, but I have to also put my pride and ego aside, because I've lost some really good girlfriends because of that, of my pride and my ego. And where has that got me? It's got me to the point where I just now realize how badly hurt I was from losing a 10-year relationship that for 2 years I allowed no one to get close to me, period. Because I was afraid of trusting someone else on a friendship level again like that again, and being hurt because everyone always leaves, which then played into my relationship in moments over the last few months of I was so afraid of my partner leaving if I did something wrong that I was trying to be perfect all of the time, knowing that I cannot be perfect and I'm not perfect, even though my anxiety or sometimes my past trauma shows up in unexpected ways and tells me that I have to be. If not, people aren't going to love me and they're going to leave me. And that is not the case. I just need to be myself. But I need to either one, acknowledge my problems or my flaws and do something about it, or either I can just say F it and y'all just take me as I am. But I don't want to be that person because I don't want to continue to live in the past. I don't want to continue to live with my trauma attached to me. I don't want to continue to live with the person who was being a bad friend and not communicating. I don't want to be a person who is not showing up in the relationship the way that my partner needs me to, not the way that my exes need me to, the way that he needs me to, so that way we can grow together as a unit in our relationship and not let the past and Dylan and all my other exes and let my current boyfriend, let my current partner, the person I'm planning my future with, suffer for the mistakes of my father and the people before me. But I have to be honest with myself and acknowledge that. And if I don't do that, that's going to cost me my relationship. That's could cost me even more of my friendship. So I have to be honest with myself. I have to be honest in the way that I keep a therapy journal. And even though I may not be able to always see my therapist on a consistent basis, depending on my schedule and things of that nature, that I keep my therapy journal and I jot these things down when I'm having these moments and revisit them and talk to my therapist about it so that way I can get the tools on how to heal. Because healing is just not a one-trick pony. It's not just a one-step program and it's done. Healing is continuous. Growth is continuous. These different stages of life that we're entering, they don't come with a rule book, but we have to be willing to adjust. We have to be willing to see what it is that we will and will not do and what is still bothering us and holding us back so that way we can move forward and get to all the things that we need to get to. We need to be honest with ourselves and know that sometimes prayer is just not enough. A lot of people may not like that, but for me, prayer was not enough because but at the time, I didn't know I was dealing with anxiety and depression that to the point where I had to be medicated. And now I am still on medication to help me with that because yes, I pray and God is on the main line. Trust me, to the point where I'm just like, okay, Jesus, I know you may be tired of hearing me, but I just got one more thing to say. I just want to say thank you. I just want to keep going. Da, 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 da. It takes prayer, it takes therapy, and sometimes if it may take medication, some extra help, that is absolutely okay. However it is or whatever it takes to help you get through to your next step in your healing journey is what it takes. There are not a lot of people that can say that that they survived a domestic violence relationship, that they survived their partner trying to kill them, that they survived their partner stalking them, and how they continue to show up every single day with a brave face like nothing ever happened, or even with a brave face to take that next step and getting help or calling the hotline for domestic violence or calling the suicide awareness hotline to actually get help to stop engaging in their eating disorder, to start loving themselves, to make the active choice to love themselves. That is not an easy task to do. It's not an easy task to even sit here in the seat and tell you how my trauma has affected me, even at 31 years old, for something that I went through over 16 years ago for almost a decade. That's not easy. But if we can give other people grace, we got to start giving ourselves some grace. If I can give Tom, Dick, and Harry some grace, you know who need to be giving me some grace? Me. Talaya needs to start giving Talaya some grace because, girl, you've gone through a lot of things, but it's about how you are showing up now. It's about the choice that you're making to identify what those triggers are, to identify that when those triggers happen, that if you need a moment to process that it's okay to communicate that I can't talk to you right now. It's probably not a good time for me to talk to you. Let me take a moment back because, again, what has my therapist told me that is my mantra that I live by? Your feelings are always valid, but they may not always be fact. Sometimes it's up to me to figure out how am I going to move past it. And this is not to say that the abusers was right and they had every right to do what they did. That's not what I'm saying at all, because that's absolutely wrong. Nobody should be putting their hands on anybody or doing anything to coerce someone into something that they do not give their clear consent to. No is no. And until you get an actual sober, valid yes, then it is a no. What I'm saying from my experience is I had to, especially within the last few weeks, had to look at how I was showing up and what I was doing in my relationship and how I had to communicate with my partner when the scale wasn't even. How I had to put my pride and ego aside, because I like to say I'm 3% wrong most of the time, but I'm gonna say about 85-15. So about 15% I'm wrong. But whatever. We're not talking about statistic here with me. But I had to put my pride and ego aside and actually acknowledge the fact that he was right when he said that all of sometimes the phone calls and everything is we are secure enough in our relationship to know that we're not going anywhere, that we trust each other, and that right now with how work and the storms and stuff that we're dealing with, sometimes to be able to show up for each other, we have to take our own separate spaces, which is nothing wrong with that. But because what may work for you is not going to work for me, and vice versa. And that's absolutely okay. And the times I'm taking to kind of engage and I'm still violating the space of not doing what you're asking me to do, which is what you need from me right now, which is to just let you breathe a little bit and get some rest. When you let me do that, I could be using that time to do something else. But I was so afraid that I would lose him. I didn't know that's what I was doing, that I just wanted to make sure that, oh, okay, let me overdo it. Let me do it. And that's what I was doing. I'm honest with myself to know that that comes out to play when I'm triggered emotionally from my past. Am I ever going to heal from that completely? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that today. But I can say that I can't control other people, but I can control how I respond. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to control how I respond moving forward. I'm going to acknowledge the fact that it was not my fault for what I went through with Dylan. That he had no right to put his hands on my body and he had no right to do the things that he did to me. It happened. I acknowledge him. I acknowledge it, but I have to forgive him for myself. So that way I can move on and I want to get to the future that I've been praying for. Because right now I am in the middle of prayers that I prayed for long ago and forgot about. And God has continued to listen to me and bless me, even in the moments where I feel like I don't deserve it, but he's still providing for me. And I am so thankful for that. I have to be able to not have the voice inside my head be his voice and abolish that and abolish my fear and get rid of all of that and take it out of my mind, because what I was putting there wasn't even there, because I wasn't listening with understanding, but I was letting my trauma run me, not knowing that's what my trauma was showing up. But it starts with me being able to at least identify it and talk about it. It starts with me being able to allow people in, but be very mindful and just be selective about who I may let into my business, because this healing thing, this progression thing, this entrepreneur journey, all of this, I can't do alone. I need people. I need my support circle. And if I don't allow them in, if I don't trust them enough, if I hold the mistakes of past friendships, or if I hold the mistakes of the ways that I had treated other friends against them, I will never be able to move forward. So I'm making the choice to acknowledge my trauma, but not let it define me. I'm making the choice to be able to pinpoint what it actually is, but communicate my feelings and also check in with myself and put myself first to understand that if I am not okay and I don't have these boundaries set, I can't show up for anybody else. I have to take care of me, my body, and my mind first, so that way I can be the best version that I want to be, the best Talaya, the best spouse, the best daughter, the best friend that I can be, the best entrepreneur that I can be, so everything around me can flourish. But every person that I want to touch with my words or with my stories, I want them to be inspired and also know that there is another side of healing and that healing is going to be continuous. It's not just this one trick pony. It's not just this one step, you're done. It's not just you write it out and you write your poem, you perform it on stage and you're done. It is a process. It is a journey that you have to continue to go on and be willing to grow with it, and to be willing to accept the things that happen and accept the things about yourself, and the things that you don't like yourself. You have the power to change those, but make sure that you get you some help, because you can't do this by yourself. I could not have done this by myself. I'm literally, like I told you, keeping my therapy journal so that way I can use it to talk to my therapist about it, but reliving the story all over again, even when I was writing the play version of it and having the play be put on stage where I had people judge my life. Now I'm going through the story of it in novel form and reliving it, everything, and trying to tell my version of the story the best way that I possibly can. It's bringing up old trauma. It's bringing up old emotions that I didn't even know that was there, but I'm not dealing with it alone. And I know that I'm not alone. So if you, or if someone that you know is experiencing any type of domestic violence relationship, I urge you to provide them with the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is 800-799-7233, that they report it. It is up to you to do what you like, whether you choose to report it to the authorities or not. Violence has no discrimination. It can happen to anybody. Some of the most beautiful people. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have a discrimination. It can happen to anybody. It's happened in generations before us, and some of us are trying to break those generational curses, but you aren't alone. And it's okay to speak up and talk to it, because no one should be doing anything without your consent. And we will see you next time on You Heard It Here with me, BTC Heard. May you all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever time you're listening or watching this. Just may you continue to be safe, have a successful and phenomenal day, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening. Happy hello, it's me, BTC Heard, and I'm here to remind you to make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel and the podcast You Heard It Here. You can do it on YouTube and Spotify, so make sure you hit the subscribe button. Please and thank you, because why? You want to hear more content, don't you? Of course you do. You want to hear me, you want to hear the folks I'm going to bring on here, and it's going to be great. So we'll catch you later.